Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Happy Sunday, everybody. First of all, my apologies. Yesterday I said there would be a video, however, I was quite sick. I research, write, record, edit, and upload all videos myself, and I was simply too ill to be able to look at a computer screen, and so I was not able to put a video up. I'm making up for that today with a Sunday episode. I hope you get some value from today's episode, and once again, my apologies for being a day late. It's the weekend, so as usual, we have a foreign policy focused video, and today's video will focus entirely on the US-China relationship from its many facets and cover all the salient developments from the last 7 days. We especially need to discuss the heating geopolitical competition between the two powers. Let's begin with the lighter content before moving to the heavier stuff. Business. Several outlets are reporting that General Secretary Xi Jinping may meet with US executives next week on this coming Wednesday, a few days after the China Development Forum, CDF. US-based The Wall Street Journal reports that the meeting organizers are some of the same ones that arranged the dinner with Xi in San Francisco last year, the US-China Business Council and the National Committee on US-China Relations. US executives are in Beijing this weekend for the China Development Forum, an annual gathering where business leaders from around the world rub shoulders with Chinese policymakers. The two-day meeting started today, Sunday. The topics set to be discussed include China's economic growth, artificial intelligence, and climate change. According to a draft delegate list, the US will make up the largest global business delegation at this month's gathering, with 34 of the more than 85 top executives expected to attend coming from American multinationals. While foreign capital has been leaving and avoiding China in recent years, scared by domestic economic woes and growing geopolitical tensions, some companies remain committed to the world's second-largest economy. On Friday, Apple Inc. Chief Executive Officer Tim Cook said his company plans to invest further in research in China, expressing, quote, "We are continuing to invest in China, in the supply chain, in research and development, and in our stores," end quote. The visit comes amid recent signs of Apple struggling in China. Sales of the iPhone fell 24% in the first 6 weeks of the year. A government ban on iPhones at state agencies and government-backed firms deepened last year too. This Xi meeting is a sign that Chinese leadership are serious about attracting foreign investment back to China. We covered the State Council Invest in China brand strategy from earlier this week. It also explains why we learned a week ago that Premier Li Qiang would skip meetings with global CEOs around the China Development Forum. It seems that these business leaders will be getting access to the top boss instead. However, this does not mean that US-China relations are warming. Indeed, the competition is deepening. On Tuesday this week, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who had just visited the Philippines, reiterated on the US ironclad commitment to defend Manila amid rising tensions with China. This is a topic we've been following closely for months now. Top leaders of the US, Japan, and the Philippines are scheduled to hold a summit in Washington on the 11th of April, while the US and the Philippines are planning to hold this year's edition of the Balikatan Joint Exercise from April 22nd to the 8th of May. Then, the next day, on Wednesday, the US State Department said that the US government recognizes the Arunachal Pradesh as part of India. China claims the area as part of southern Tibet, its so-called Xizang Autonomous Region. The following day, Thursday, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson hit back saying that the, quote, China-India boundary question is a matter between the two countries and has nothing to do with the US side, end quote. On Wednesday, the US leader of the Indo-Pacific Command, in a prepared testimony to the US House Armed Services Committee, said that the Chinese mainland is on track, quote, to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027, end quote, adding that China is building its military and nuclear arsenal on a scale not seen since the Second World War. Quote, despite Beijing's economic challenges, its official defense budget has increased by 16% over recent years to more than $223 billion US, end quote. In the 3 years since he took command, he said the People's Liberation Army, PLA, has added more than 400 fighter aircraft, along with more than 20 major warships. It's also doubled its inventory of ballistic and cruise missiles since 2020. China's defense budget is still much less than that of the US, of course. President Biden this month proposed a $850 billion Pentagon budget for fiscal year 2025. Though commentators are quick to point out that the US defense budget is spread out across the world for all manner of contingencies, from Asia to the Middle East to Europe, whereas China's military preparations are focused on the Taiwan Strait primarily. However, the US does still have the advantage of wealthy advanced allies in key theaters. In East Asia alone, it has allies in Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and unofficially with Taiwan too. Nevertheless, state media continues to push the idea that the US is being spread too thin and must rely on allies. Quote, "The US's global hegemony has been severely impacted by the recent conflicts around the world. Its military capability is on the decline due to its deindustrialization. It has acknowledged China's rapid national defense modernization progress, and that it feels that it cannot face China alone." End quote. Last year, in his meeting with Biden, Xi Jinping expressed that Taiwan would be incorporated into the mainland, but that the date of this had yet to be set. Next up, the technology decoupling has become an increasingly painful spot in the relationship, a sign that Beijing is concerned that perhaps it is a losing battle. But before we move into this, I have a huge favor to ask. If you're enjoying today's episode or getting some value from it, it's a huge help if you can like and subscribe. 45% of regular viewers are not subscribed to the channel, but this is a huge help if you can hit that subscribe button. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description below for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable. It's just me making these episodes, and this is a big help in keeping me going and to ensure that the channel is primarily supported by subscribers rather than reliant on corporate sponsorship. Thank you everybody for the ongoing support. On Thursday, China's Ministry of Commerce made angry statements in response to the recent US moves in the chip sector, saying the United States has overstretched the concept of national security, abused export controls, and disrupted the global semiconductor industrial chains. The spokesperson complained at the press event that, quote, "The United States has been providing huge subsidies and tax incentives to its domestic chip sector, and some measures have been forcing companies to abandon China and choose the United States, which are discriminatory and have violated market laws and international economic and trade rules." End quote. Although the statement even attracted derision from some Chinese commentators, who were quick to point out that the US subsidies to chips are dwarfed by Chinese subsidies to these same industries. In response to the US Department of Commerce considering adding several Chinese chip companies related to Huawei to the sanctions list, something which we covered a few days ago, China's Ministry of Commerce spokesperson said China, quote, "has always opposed politicizing and weaponizing economic trade and technological issues, but in recent years the United States has abused export controls, unjustly sanctioned and suppressed Chinese enterprises, and seriously disrupted the global industrial and supply chains. If the United States imposes sanctions on more Chinese companies, along with persisting suppression of Huawei, citing so-called connections, this is a typical economic bullying practice." End quote. The same day, Thursday, the US Undersecretary of Commerce for Industry and Security, speaking to the Foreign Affairs Committee, said the 7-nanometer processor that China's massive Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, SMIC, made for Huawei, quote, "potentially," end quote, violated US controls, expressing at the hearing, quote, "we'll assume that it was SMIC. I can't talk about any investigations that may or may not be going on, but we certainly share these concerns, and that's certainly the reporting." End quote. SMIC's share price plunged 6% in trading the following day. Meanwhile, as one commentator expressed this week, some of the good feelings from the November Xi-Biden summit feel like they're starting to fade, as state media attacks on the US have begun growing once again in frequency and intensity. We will end today's video by examining one of these state media attacks. As always, we examine these articles not because we believe them to be true or false, nor to engage in refutations or point out hypocrisy, but rather to get a sense of the rhetoric being employed by Beijing and the narratives being consumed domestically by the Chinese themselves. We also note that state media pieces like this are less clumsy than they once were, with sharpened barbs for the age of information warfare, and with a closed information environment within the Chinese market itself, counterattacks are more difficult to launch. So, this article, which we are going to be looking at here, is from the state-run 中国军网, a widely read Chinese military-read outlet, attacking the upcoming Third Democracy Summit. Quote, "In the grand narrative crafted by the US government, the Democracy Summit was supposed to be a beacon of hope, a platform calling on democratic countries worldwide to oppose authoritarianism. However, as the first two summits were held, it has become increasingly clear that the so-called Democracy Summit is not only unrelated to democracy, but also filled with American arrogance and double standards. The United States not only uses its political system as a standard answer, grading and commenting on countries around the world, categorizing them into excellent, good, average, and poor, but also imperiously demands other countries to trim their national conditions to fit the shoes of so-called American-style democracy. In fact, the United States is internationally recognized as a poor student of democracy and a country in democratic regression. What impression has so-called American democracy left on the world over the years? It's the iconic scene of thousands of people storming Capitol Hill. It's the black man George Floyd crying, 'I can't breathe,' before his death. It's the various chaoses of democracy distortion, political dysfunction, and social disharmony within the United States. What has American democracy brought to the world? It's the promotion of the new Monroe Doctrine in Latin American countries, the instigation of color revolutions in the Eurasian region, and the remote control of the Arab Spring in West Asia and North Africa, from Iraq to the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, from Libya to Syria, from Afghanistan to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and then to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Americans talk about democracy and freedom on the surface, claiming to save the people of other countries from dire straits, but underneath it all are dirty deals and shameless pursuits of interests. It can be said that the United States has never truly followed democratic principles in international relations, but cloaked in the guise of multilateralism and rules, has stirred up division and opposition, created group confrontations. This is a betrayal and desecration of the spirit and values of democracy." End quote. Like I said, we should expect the frequency and intensity of these sort of attacks from state media to continue growing in the coming months. Please let me know what you think of these state media comments here, as well as the other developments we covered from the last week of US-China relations in the comments section below. That is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Once again, my apologies for not having a video yesterday. I hope you did enjoy today's video, however. Have a great Sunday, have a restful weekend, and I will see you all tomorrow.